Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the I Do What I Want podcast. This is a live stream. Sorry, I was trying to think of what I was supposed to say. I'm going to set up some recording for the podcast that will be going on Spreaker and Spotify and all that stuff. But I thought it'd be fun to do a video this time because frankly, my mom wants to see me. So, hi, Mom. All right, let's get started with my very nominal, less than nominal podcasting skills. I don't even know if this mic is the one that's getting the audio right now. Full disclosure. Oop, okay, here we go. All right. So here's my intro music. Welcome, welcome to I Do What I Want, which is my author podcast. I am your host, Hollis Joe McCullum, or just Hollis. That is my full name and my pen name, so I say the whole thing. And this is a podcast dedicated to my personal writing journey, talking about other independent authors and hopefully talking to them. I'm going to be having more guests soon and just yeah, book stuff in general, that sort of related enjoyable stuff. So in this episode I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the things that I have written besides To Save a World, which, I mean, at this point, if you've been listening or watching any of my videos, you know that I wrote the fantasy adventure novel To Save a World. Ah, hooray. And that I am very excited about fantasy and all of that nonsense and very passionate about my writing. However, you might not know that I am presently in the editing phase of the sequel to Save a World. What? I know, exciting, right? Should be exciting. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. So that is happening very soon. I am actually hoping to be done with it and self-publishing it maybe by the end of the year. Maybe. We'll see. And that will be called The Queen Witch, and everyone who survived the first book will be coming back. For those of you who haven't read it, I'm not going to tell you who the survivors are, but yeah. So that one is great, but the other book that I'm going to talk more about in this episode is the second novel I actually wrote, which I have entitled Spare the Swallow, and swallow meaning the bird. Uh, and that one is a fantasy adventure novel as well. It is more serious in a lot of ways. It's a war story, which is probably why it's more serious. Of course, To Save a World and the sequel are dealing with very serious issues as well. But since Spare the Swallow is it's there's genocide, it gets a little heavy. Gets just a little heavy. And it's the villain I feel is more hateable. And then there was actually a scene that I wrote with the villain, King Cyrus. He's, horrible king of the country that's being the awful oppressor. And I actually, after I wrote what particular scene, I felt the need to shower. Sometimes we authors do that. We go to a very dark place. So that is something I wanted to talk to you about. Now, Spare the Swallow is not at all based in Raashan. It has nothing to do with my first book. Not even the same fantasy world. The fantasy world that I set this one in is called Cell, Cel, and it's based a lot on Etruscan culture. The ancient Etruscans of Italy were that's who Tuscany is named after, an ancient Italian culture that they actually originally came across from the area that is now Libya, and there's a whole thing there. But they are an ancient culture. They're actually the builders of Rome. Yeah, a lot of those things that we've give Rome credit for, it so wasn't Rome. No, mm-mm. I still have some personal issues with Rome. Having, for those of you who don't know, my degree is in world history with a specialization in ancient cultures, particularly the Etruscans of ancient Italy. So I'm extremely passionate about them, so much so that I decided to base a fantasy culture on them. And I called that culture the Docvens, which Docven, if you're curious how I'm spelling that. And it's something I made up. This is not a fantasy race that other authors have written about before or anything like that. This is simply a I made it up. I decided these beings were a thing. Kind of like many authors do. We love to invent stuff. It's super fun. So that's kind of our job. So the Fens are, of course, based on the Etruscans. Their culture it relies very heavily on the Etruscans. If you see me looking down, I am checking my notes or possibly checking the time because I don't want this to be some crazy long-winded thing. I would like this to continue to be a regular thing. So, uh, yes, sorry, the Etruscans. They, or the dock fens are Mediterranean looking, like the Etruscans were, like well, and honestly, I'm half Italian, but I look like my Italian mother, so, you know, olive skin, dark hair, mostly dark eyes in the dock fen culture, darker, or lighter eyes are actually very rare. It does happen, but having blue or green eyes is considered very rare indeed, but the standout physical feature of a Dachshund, they have rounded ears like humans do. They look like humans, except their eyes sparkle like gemstones in the sunlight, and it's the light of their souls. And, so they look if you were to draw the eye with the pupil in the iris and all that, it looks like a human eye, but then add the, brilliant cut sparkle of a diamond to a regular eye, and that's what Doc Van eyes look like all the time, these gorgeous, like, gemstone beaming eyes, and that is the light of a Doc Ven's soul. So, when the Doc Ven passes away, those lights go out and they're dull. It's it's just something I thought was really pretty. The other thing that separates well, the other 2 things that separate Doc Vens from humans in particular is that they are longer lived. Doc Ven will live for about, I think I said 400 years. I have to check my pretty sure 400 years. So, they live for about 400 years, and that means that they age much more slowly. So, childhood takes longer, that sort of thing. For some context, the main characters in my book are around 75 or 80, which would actually put them around the age of 20, early 20s. It would put them in the early 20s age group, uh, if in case you were wondering what that would look like. They age pretty slowly by comparison. And then they also are the only race in all of Cell in that particular fantasy world that can wield true magic, like what wizards wield and that sort of thing. Other races on their planet, humans, there are elves and there are dwarves, but none of the other races have the ability to wield magic. Only Dockfens have that ability. Some of the other races can do like the elves are amazing with plants and animals, and it seems like magic sometimes, but the elves in that world are just so in tuned with nature and the natural world that it seems like magic, but it's actually just a very, very enhanced, close-knit relationship with the natural world and a deep understanding beyond what other humans or anyone can comprehend. But the Dockvens can, make fireballs appear from nowhere, and not all of them, only a few of them have the talent to wield magic, and they cultivate it and they do all of that. So that is what gives them something special, and as I told you, it's based on an ancient Etruscan culture, so, for those of you who are hugely unfamiliar, I will reference Greco-Roman. So think ancient Greco-Roman fantasy world. So you have all of the beautiful big pillars, and people are wearing togas and, stolas and all those wonderful things, and drinking lots of wine, and gorgeous Mediterranean fantasy worlds in the Greco-Roman times. And the reason I named it Spare the Swallow was there's a story from, and let me check my notes. And I'm checking my notes so that I can pronounce his name correctly. So, in the 1st century BCE, or BC for those of you historian for those of you who don't know, historians changed BC and AC, which stands for before Christ and after Christ, like decades ago, to BCE, before Common Era, and CE, the Common Era. The line is still the same because there's no way we're gonna go back thousands of years and change all the we're not gonna change the history books. But they did change the terminology decades ago to, just to make it more inclusive because not everyone's a Christian. So that's something that they did in the historical world for those of you who are unaware. So BCE is the same as BC. 1st century BCE, which so from the year 1000, or I'm sorry, 100 to the year 0. And then you understand that then that would be after the year 0, after you get to or you get to 0 or you get to 1 BCE, you would then go start over and start at 1 Common Era, or old terminology AC, because you count um okay, in a descending order from way ancient times up to that breaking point when Jesus was crucified, and then after Jesus. Okay, by that year that Jesus was big with the crucifixion and the coming back to light, all that year, that's when that break occurs. So it's yep, you're descending on the way to it, and then you start counting at 1, and then you go into ascending numbers from year 1. So this is previous to Jesus Christ, before that. You probably didn't need all that history lesson, but there you go. Just in case. Sorry if that was condescending, or you just already knew it and you didn't need me to say it. Go ahead and just skip all that. Uh But during the 1st century BCE, That was a time in the Roman Empire, which I'm sure you all know what that is, called the Social War. And during that time, like Rome was huge. That's what Rome was kicking, but they were doing all the stuff and all they were, I mean, they were oppressing a lot of people. Let's just be honest. Rome was not a friendly empire. They were very, very far from it. They had they did a lot like most empires, there were good things that came of it, but there were a lot of bad things too, and there were a lot of people within the Roman Empire who were not Roman per se. They were part of the empire even in Italy, there were Italian tribes and cities and things like that that did not like Rome at all. They they were a part of the empire because they had to be, but it by no means was a choice for them. And this time period was called the Social War when a lot of the tribes and everything were rebelling against the empire. And this was a very, very dangerous time. Many Roman soldiers were, because there were a lot of rebellions, they were preemptively put out into these cities and towns and, in these territories that people were uppity, just to sort of keep an eye on things, saying, hey, here's a military presence, calm down. And one of the cities that the military presence was in was a city called Asculum, and this is on Italy's Adriatic coast, which, I mean, Venice wouldn't have existed at that time, but, on that side of Italy, where you could look across and be like, "What's up, Greece?" That on the Adriatic coast. And the historian, an ancient historian, and I'm gonna read the name, otherwise I'm going to completely butcher it, but his name was Diodorus Siculus, and he was from Sicily. Siculus is literally means of Sicily, um, or from Sicily, or however you want to translate that Latin. But he happened to be in Asculum when there was a night of theatrical performances and people just making uh, comedic or dramatic. There was an evening of the arts out in, of course, the Greco-Roman world loved art stuffs, they were into theater, man. They enjoyed it. I mean, we all do, but they in particular were known for their tragedies and all of that. So, they were there and there were a couple of citizens performing who made some jokes about Rome and the Roman Empire. Uh Diodorus does not write down precisely what these jokes were. He does, however, record what happened. So in the crowd, there were several. I think that they said that there were. I think the exact account says that there were two or three, maybe, Roman soldiers in the crowd. They didn't like those jokes. The audience laughed. The soldiers didn't. This being a very dangerous time, soldiers stood up, walked on stage, and murdered the performer. That just happened. Keeping in mind, murder out in the open, not uncommon. I know. In our modern day sensibility, we're like, "Oh my god, clutching the pearls." But, sorry, it was normal. It was normal. It was something that was legal to do to gain political power. If you wanted to gain, take out your opponent, you could legally murder them. The murder of Caesar on the steps, that was, yeah, I mean, yeah, like, you all know Julius Caesar. That was a totally legal political murder. Totally legal. And, as far as Caesar being stabbed to death like that, it's historical records don't necessarily support, da, 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 it's a great story, we're not gonna get into all of that, but that would have been a completely legal murder in ancient Rome. Just to give you some context. So the soldiers don't like it, they get up, stab, stab with their swords, they kill, and then they tell people to get rid of the body, sit back down, and bring out another performer. Well, the citizens of Asculum are not feeling very theatrical right after witnessing someone get butchered for making a couple of jokes. There were a lot of tensions running high. Some of the other performers do come out and drag the body off the stage. And just as things seem to be getting to a boiling point, a very, very brave performer comes out, and we do not know this performer's name. The historian did not record it, unfortunately. I wish we did know his name. But he came out on the stage. People were starting to get riled up. They were looking to kill. And he said, I'm not a Roman either. I travel throughout Italy searching for favors by making people laugh and giving pleasure. So spare the swallow, which the gods allow to nest safely in all your houses. Now, these words, the swallow being the Romans. And the reason the performer came out and said, spare the swallow, because the Romans were guests in their city and they had just done some murdering. And most of the people were very unhappy with the Roman presence in general anyway, because they were probably not great guests. I'm sure they did a lot of very bad behaviors while they were there. They felt entitled to them. I'm sure that they demanded free food and other things of the people on a daily basis because that's they felt entitled to it. That is what it was. Particularly if they were on a power trip. Let's face it, if you were a soldier in Rome, you probably had a power trip, especially if you were in an anti-Roman territory of Rome that was forced into submission by the oppressors. They didn't have a choice. Probably pretty trippy on that power. But the reason he said, "I'm not Roman either," he starts out with that, is because he's letting the audience know, "Hey, I'm one of you. First and foremost, I'm with you. I'm your ally." But he asks them to spare the swallow, spare the Roman soldiers that nest in the eaves of the houses. And the reason he asks that is because that was a way of letting the people realize, if you do this, if you ki one man has died here tonight, if you attack these soldiers, even if we kill all 3 of them, the whole might of Rome will come and annihilate us. They'll stamp out every life in this city simply for the offense because Rome doesn't care. And that is why he asked them to spare the swallow, because by asking them to spare the soldiers, he asked them to spare their own lives. And I always felt that was a very powerful sentiment. And since this is a fantasy Greco-Roman war story, I wanted and by the way, it did stop the violence according to, Diodorus. They stopped, the show actually continued on the blood-stained stage. These things happen, and and that was that. But I wanted to use that. When I first heard that little footnote of history, it really struck me. And the story that I had already written, because I heard this after I had written the draft of my second novel, I just said, "Wow, I think that's my title." Because it's a war story, and it is. It relates in a lot of ways, not just in a cultural sense, but in the feeling of, if we don't cooperate, we're all gonna die, and we don't want that. So, which I'm not gonna give plot points away or anything, but it's very tense in the book. The Dockfens are the ones who are being oppressed, and it's definitely something that I found very interesting, but that is I have the I've typed up the story in a more eloquent way at the very beginning of my second novel, where right after the introduction, you can read just that little, like, one-page story of history, and that is why I entitled the book "Spare the Swallow." Spare them to save yourself, and not because you care about them, but because you care about your city, you care about everything that goes on, and that's pretty important, don't you think? To to make sure that everything is all right. And it's like many of my books, all of my books. It's a story with adventure and fighting and that sort of thing, and lots of fantasy and magic. But of course, it also has a romantic subplot. So I'm very excited about that. In this particular book, I have a plot of, and again, I'm not going to give too much away. I'd like you to read it and discover it for your own self. But in this book, you have two people who have been childhood friends basically since they were born. So, and they're not brother and sister or anything because that would be incest and very gross, and I'm never ever. But they were neighbors. Their parents were friends. They're friends. Oh, another thing about the Doc Vens is they reproduce very slowly, which is great. If you're a thriving culture, it's great for population control and everything. Everybody always has enough to eat because you don't have this huge population. Most Doc Vens only have one child. Just because reproduction, it's very difficult for women to conceive. I didn't map it all out, but theoretically, fertility cycles don't last very long. Big spaces of time in between being fertile, that sort of thing. Which again, actually, as a culture, works out well because if you only have one child, or at most two to care for, then you have more resources to go around. And not saying China's right in what they do, they most certainly are not, but if your biology in itself is does that, then it does make it easier for a culture to thrive because you don't have an overpopulation problem. But here's the caveat: if you get into a fight with another country, or they don't pick a fight. In fact, their culture thrives. Dockfens are on a peninsula. I told you this was based on Italian culture, so they're on a peninsula at the center of trade routes. They are the center of trade for land and sea, everything. And they have positive relationships with all the surrounding kingdoms because it benefits them. They trade with everyone. So war, very far from anything they've ever done. It's self-preservation, it's beneficial, but they have a thriving culture economically and artistically and all the other things because for generations, for a couple thousand years, everything has just been great. They've maintained the relationships, and when you don't reproduce very quickly, you probably have a natural inclination not to pick fights because you don't have enough people to wage war. You can't afford to lose anyone. But when a super sadistic, actually, I write the king as a true sadistic psychopath. I actually read up a lot on sadistic psychopaths and their behavior. It was it was a dark time. But I did. I watched a lot of documentaries and, read the scientific studies and picked apart some some things, and so I could write the villain as appropriately as I could. We do a lot of research, and we authors I speak of, and so when sadistic psychopath, such as the king in my book, who is a human king of a human nation, and by comparison to Doc Fenn's, humans breed like rabbits. They have so many people by comparison. And this king notices that. He sees the richness of their culture and he just wants to take it. They've been trading with them for a long time. He wants to take it. He wants it. He wants all of their riches and he wants to satisfy that horribly dark need to do horrible, horrible things to others. So he does. And it's a very difficult, uh, you know, it's yeah, it for me, it was emotionally a little uh, painful to write because the main characters, you have this, this couple who have been in love their whole lives and they didn't realize it. They've just always been together and they don't realize that they love each other until the extenuating circumstances of this war start throwing all these monkey wrenches in their perfect existence because they really did have just an idyllic existence prior to war coming. This beautiful, beautiful life. Um and then the hard times hit and they realize, "Oh, all of this badness is going on, but I really love this person." And so, yeah, and I'm not gonna spoil things for you, but you have them realizing they've been in love all this time, but there's a war going on, and it's a lot of push and pull, and a lot of relationships get touched on, like, the main character is a character named Lucretia, which for those of you who, don't know, Lucretia is actually an old Etruscan name, and it means prophet, like, like a prophet, not like monetary, but, like, I herald things and foresee, I prophesize. That's what, um, that's what the name Lucretia means, in the old, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's and of course, the meaning of the name as a prophet does come into play in the book as well. So, she's a mage, which is a wizard or a magic user or, whatever, sorcerer. There are differences depending on, if you do role-playing games such as Pathfinder or Dungeons& and Dragons and whatever. There are differences in the classes of magic user, but for the sake of simplicity, for those listeners who are not as familiar with all of the separation, so, I know that they're different, I know that there are categories and things like that, please don't come after me. But basically, a mage, a wizard, a sorcerer, a witch, like, these are all magic users, okay? They all do spells, and I call the Doc Fens mages. I don't call them wizards, I call them mages. So that is what a mage is, in case you were not aware. And there are no other classes of magic user in the world of Cell because, as I explained before, the Doc Fens are the only race on the entire planet that can use true magic. So something in their biology. They're the only ones who can do it. But she is a mage, and the other main character, Isaac. He is not Isaac, Isaac. He is also a mage. They went to mage school together and all of that. They've been inseparable since they were kids. And they but anyway, Lucretia, she's a mage, but she becomes the general of the army because when the bad times hit, when everything starts really going down and they realize, "Oh, we're at war," they don't really have a military force. Like, the castle guard was in place to protect the emperor. The dock fence have an emperor, and, they have some military, but an army? They didn't really have an army. They didn't have enough people to have an army. They didn't. They had enough people to have soldiers to guard things and to but, 10,000 people strong or however but I actually did not look up like, is there a number? Let me know. If you know this, is there a standardized number that's like 10,000 or 100,000 or whatever, like, that categorizes you as army? Let me know. I'd be curious to know that. So, yeah, put it in the comments or message me on Instagram, whatever. That I would like to know that. That interesting. But the point is the dock vens, they have a military force. They do have people who are trained in military, but they don't have an army. They don't have enough people to have an army. They just don't. It doesn't happen like that. So they when things hit, regular citizens who they just have to start joining up. They have to. Anyone who is able-bodied and has a skill, congratulations. And, Lucretia and Izek do get involved very early on. Of course, there's a precursor before the whole war breaks out that's in the book. So, that is all there, but they're drug into that very early on into the whole political, and they are part of the group that actually uncovers what is about to happen. And so they are in the center of things, and Lucretia becomes the general. She's simply of that personality. She's a domineering personality. She's very decisive. She will get things done, and she has the mental ability to compartmentalize extremely well, which being able to compartmentalize your emotions is pretty much vital, I think, in anyone who who has had to fight. And I personally am not a veteran. I don't know, and thank you very much to all of our veterans who have fought for us and kept us safe. I genuinely appreciate that. But in my personal experience and estimation, having the ability to compartmentalize your emotions because that's vital to sanity as a soldier, and especially as a commanding officer in a war or any sort of military conflict. Because if you cannot think of the mission and stay true on what you need to be doing, if you allow yourself to get distracted by the horrors that are surrounding you, and there will be horrors surrounding you, eh, how how are you going to do the job? And Lucretia is very good at that. That's just a natural thing she has. So she does become general, and she is fighting the fight, and Izek is also, becomes an officer and that sort of thing. And those who can do, the Dockfens want to live. This is not a matter of country for them and maintaining country. It is literally a matter of life and death for the entire race. If people go to war now in our modern world or even throughout history, we very rarely think of it as a genocide. It happens. It has happened and it's terrible. But um, usually, historically speaking, it is a case of an oppressor coming in and they just want the other culture or country to be under their foot And there'll be a lot of death in the meantime, but they're not looking to completely wipe out a population in most cases. In most cases, they're just saying, "Okay, obey us. Become ours." And once the other country submits or is forced to submit, they I'm not saying they're perfectly nice little kittens, but, eh, usually genocide doesn't happen. Historically, very high generalization there. But in this case with the Docklands, with their very low population and everything else, they do not have the ability to yeah, they don't have that luxury of saying, "Okay, if we surrender, things are they're not. They know what's going to happen to them. It is genuinely life and death. It's very, very I'm having a hard time thinking of the right word, tense. It's it it's visceral. It's downright visceral, like gutting to every one of them. And the worst part is even starting out, no matter how talented each individual is, no matter how strong someone might be, war is a game of numbers when it comes right down to it. And guess what? They're vastly outnumbered. So you can see why this is a tough story. Because the humans, they've got a ton, and this is not a small human kingdom. This is a big human kingdom. They're big. They've got a very well established, extremely large army. The Dolphins don't have any of that. They've never needed it before, and frankly, wouldn't be able to amass the numbers even if they tried. Not of their own kind. And of course, don't worry. They go forth, they gain some allies because they can't. They realize right away that they cannot fight just themselves. Again, it's a game of numbers when you get right down into it. They need help from other countries who also hate this king and his stuff, which lucky for them, a lot of people do. So again, I'm not gonna make you do it. It's tough. And here's the other thing. Lucretia, the main character, the general, uh, she, from the beginning, is plagued by dreams from the supreme goddess, who I named Ushi, which is actually named after the supreme goddess in Etruscan mythology. Big surprise. I basically took Etruscan mythology and, whoops. So, because that's what I did. That makes it fun for me. And by the way, if you are a historian who is familiar with the Etruscans or some Greco Roman things in general, even Babylonian a little bit, then you will pick up some Easter eggs in there that, I mean, again, historical accuracy. This is a fantasy novel. Don't come for me. But for my own entertainment, I definitely threw in some Easter eggs of like true cultural practices and little things that yeah, if you know something about those cultures in that time period, you might catch it. Super fun. I think again, I'm a history nerd. I find fun in different places sometimes. If you're not into that, then that's fine. Hopefully you just enjoy it when you read it. But uh anyway, so Ushi is the supreme goddess of the cosmos, and Lucretia's plagued by dreams of this goddess. From the beginning of the book, she starts talking about it, and the goddess is telling her that she's a beacon and that she doesn't have a choice. She says, "There's nothing for it. You are the beacon. You must do it. You must be alone." And I'm not going to tell you what any of that means because being cryptic is amusing. Also, please read my book. But so spare the swallow, as I've rambled on about it for longer than I ought to have. that is going to be I'm working on it's all edited, it's all whatnots. I am working on getting it designed with my excellent friend, who's a fabulous designer. She's going to do the cover design and page layout for me. And I'm hoping to have that published by late summer. If I can get it earlier, woo! But hoping to have it published late summer. I will be publishing through Amazon this time, so the Book Baby thing for those of you who are familiar with self-publishing. And it will be available on Amazon and it'll be ebook and a hard copy, not a hardcover, like a soft cover paperback book. I'm very, very excited and I hope that listening to me ramble on about it will be exciting for you too. I do base a lot of the characters on my own personal family members. There is a character named Vaden who is an excellent swordsman, really great guy. And that's my brother. He's he's basically entirely based on my older brother Ross, and then who I hope to have on the podcast one of these days. He said he would. I asked him. He said he would come on at some point. So, there's that. And then my parents, Lucretia's parents in the book are strongly based on my parents, my mom and dad. So they and they're, obviously how they have different names and all of that, but who they are, their personalities, and even the pet name that Lucretia's mother has for her is one that my mother calls me. And as an author, it helped me. I think a lot of authors do it, but it helps you feel more connected, feel more personalized to the characters as you're writing them because these people have the same people, when there's real love behind a character for you, I really genuinely love my parents very deeply, and I very, very genuinely love my brother, and it's, to write them into a story is emotional. So I hope that you'll read it and I will be posting more things as they go. This has gotten to be a longer episode than I intended. Sorry. But I hope you like the video format. Let me know how you feel about the video format as well. Do you like seeing my face? I did not bother putting on makeup. I apologize, but not that much because I'm lazy. And if I'm gonna keep doing video podcasts, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'm not gonna put on makeup. I'm not gonna do it. So I might if I had makeup on earlier, I'll do it. But it's the "Hi, this is me. This is what my face looks like." Pimples and all. But thank you so, so much for joining me, and yeah, check out, I Do What I Want. This is available, it's on the Spotify channel. I Do What I Want is the name of the podcast. You can find it that way. This is available on Spreaker. It's obviously available here on YouTube. And if you want to go to my website, hollisjoemccullumauthor.com, I have links to all the things on there, my social media and all of that, plus my blog, which just some nice authory musings, like 1 to 2 minute reads tops per blog entry. And if you just want to know a little bit about me, there are 2 pages. There's the blog page and the homepage, so, it's a small website. It's mostly for that, and you are also links to purchase To Save a World, and there will be future links to purchase the other books too. So thank you so, so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this live YouTube thing, and if you did, then let me know. Again, email me or comments the things to the comments or if you actually are somebody who knows me, like call or text me and let me know. I'm not giving out my phone number here, but I know that many of these people, many of you who are listeners have my personal phone number. So, call me. Let me know what you think. I'd love the feedback because I am still figuring out all of this. This microphone was very noisy before. Anyway, have a good night.